Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is France24, and we're looking at what has been the star of the show at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Iran's new president, Hassan Rouhani, the same who courted audiences at the United Nations back in September, this time holding closed-door meetings with oil investors. This just days after the European Union and Washington partially lifted sanctions over Iran's nuclear program, this part of an interim deal. Iran's president, who is looking for investors to help upgrade an economy that badly needs cash and investment.
For some, an encouraging speech from Iranian President Hassan Rouhani on Thursday.
It's a historic speech, most important speech we've seen from an Iranian leader since the revolution. This is a guy that wants to show the world that he personally is committed to a comprehensive nuclear deal. That's extraordinary. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, and there are a lot of people that are going to be very skeptical. There are a lot of people who will be upset. But if you ask me, is that the speech that Davos wanted to hear? Is that the speech the international community hoping for a deal wanted to hear? Absolutely.
The key message, to tell the world Tehran's ready to start going back to business. However, although enthusiastic about progress, the head of Renault Nissan, present at the conference, has no plans to invest in Iran for now.
Rouhani's presence at Davos and the negotiations which have taken place concerning Iran have made us optimistic that the sanctions will be removed, and once they are, the Iranian market will greatly develop.
Some took Rouhani's word that he'll stick to Iran's recent nuclear deal struck with world powers.
Position about negotiations on the nuclear file. The answer was very clear. The negotiations will go on, but he was clear that they are not going to move towards manufacturing any nuclear weapons.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged the West to take Rouhani's words with more than a pinch of salt and wait for actions.
These are, a change of words with unchanging deeds. Iran remains aggressive, that it supports terror, that it participates in the slaughter in Syria, that it's pursuing the development of ballistic missiles and plutonium for nuclear weapons.
However, he did say if Rouhani was sincere, it would be a boon for peace for the whole region.
And we're joined by our International Affairs Editor, Douglas Herbert. Everyone's staying on message in Davos. Interesting that the Israelis, they didn't reject it completely out of hand. We heard some more conciliatory noises from Israel's president, Shimon Peres, on this.
Yeah, Israel's president, but I mean, Netanyahu is really the big speech of the day when it comes to Rouhani. And, the initial reaction, a lot of people were saying, actually it seemed a little bit, he was sort of open. He was, he was asked a question if, what if, a year and a half from now, it seems that there are openings and Iran is actually abiding by the terms of this agreement and things. And he said, well, yeah, of course, if the Iranian threat is removed, there'll be amazing prospects for, broader peace across the region. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, obviously, there'll be great implications for that. But obviously, there was a giant conditional in that. And as we saw, Benjamin Netanyahu spent most of his question and answer session in Davos basically, railing against Rouhani and suggesting that, saying at one point that Arab nations are not reassured by what Netanyahu called Rouhani's soft words, that they're not fooled, they can read between the lines, that it's one thing for Rouhani to say something that sounds nice, but, is that something real? Can you actually believe in it? So for me, I didn't really hear a change in the substance of Netanyahu's tone. I mean, he was at a business forum here, in Davos, and let's not forget the actual speech he gave was devoted to technology, research and development, science. Come to Israel, we are the cutting edge of high-tech technology. And it was only afterwards that he was asked about Iran. I didn't see a major change there. I saw still quite, not quite, a hard line approach towards Iran in all ways, really.
And in fact, getting back to Rouhani, his encounter with investors is actually Act Two, because it's been a little bit underreported, but already when he went to the United Nations, he did already meet with...
Absolutely. He had lunch at the United Nations on the sideline of that UN General Assembly in September, the one where he launched his giant charm offensive. He was the star of New York, basically. He was the talk of the town when he was there. And yeah, everyone with a bit of cash to invest right now wanted to have his ear for a few minutes. And he had a lunch with a lot of business executives. And he is, as you said, continuing that so-called charm offensive. This is the whole strategy right now. I mean, the reason that, it's believed that the Supreme Leader is cutting him slack to have this opening, this overture to the West is precisely because, whether they admit it really explicitly or not, the sanctions have had quite a bite, quite a harsh effect in Iran. They know that something has to give at some point. The economic opening is one way, perhaps, to get the people back on side. So it's a gamble. It's a risk. One of the big questions to ask right now, as he makes this pitch for business and as he has this overture to the West, is he still has to contend, and this is a daily battle, even for Rouhani, with the hardline element in Iran. And it's not to be neglected, because any little slip on his part, anything which looks like he might be going soft on the West, or that the West, on the other hand, isn't delivering on its end of the deal, so to speak, and the hardliners are ready to pounce. And it's unclear what the Supreme Leader would do. How far will he go in supporting Rouhani's overture?
But is it fair to say, after the easing of those sanctions at the start of the week, the partial easing of those sanctions...
Partial, the key word there.
That he's bought himself 6 months, effectively?
Well, he does have. I mean, he does have 6 months. I mean, that is essentially the timeline. Barack Obama, the other European powers have made it clear that, everything that is right now in motion, the partial easing of these sanctions. And I might, just add that the brunt of the sanctions remain very firmly in place, including Iran's being barred from the international financial system, leading it to mostly barter deals. But any misstep on Iran's part being very closely watched, and this is the only reason Barack Obama was able to really get the consent to seal this deal, and still Congress wants to perhaps override and apply sanctions, but any misstep, and it can all be reversed. It's all still revocable, so to speak. So we're on a very fine tripwire here, and that 6 months is going to be a very difficult six months, and getting that long-term agreement is almost anyone will tell you it's going to be extremely difficult, especially the big issues like that heavy water reactor in Iraq, heavy uranium enrichment at levels of 20% or so.
And of course, the other issue on the other end, this is why Rouhani got elected in the first place, is you've got the country with the world's second largest gas reserves, I believe, huge oil reserves, and the infrastructures are crumbling.
Yeah, and this is the whole thing. The infrastructure, the currency has been tumbling. This is an economy in disarray, and an economy which has had to scrape just to get basic parts. You do have goods. People aren't starving in Iran, but like we've been saying, and at one point, even the Iranian Bureau of Commerce admitted that the sanctions have had quite an effect, and if they were to continue to this effect, the macroeconomic effect on the economy could be even worse in the medium to long term. The infrastructure, absolutely, until you get that Western investment coming in again, until you get those companies we saw in a report earlier, that Renault, Nissan, they're not about to jump right back in, still taking a very standoffish approach. And this is the very early days, Francois, and a lot of Western companies, they may be champing at the bit, like you said, to get into Iran, but they're not everyone wants to be the first one in, and not everyone thinks that this is necessarily the right time. They're still not in their comfort zone yet. A lot of people are still waiting to see. But Iran, as we saw today with Rouhani's pitch, is pretty desperate to get that money back, to get that investment back, to basically put themselves back on the map as a legitimate player in the world community.
Douglas Herbert from our International Affairs Desk, many, many thanks. Coming up, we're going to go back to Davos in a short while. Marcus Carlson has been there all day. He'll be giving us the take from the Swiss Alpine Resort on that issue. Plus, we'll have more news and all the day's sports, including a first Swiss into the final of the Australian Open, Stan Wawrinka. Could Roger Federer join him? Dan Levy will tell us.